My wife secretly sold our family home for $350, $0 to her boss after pretending to be pregnant, then forged my signature to transfer ownership. Now she's claiming I owe her $200, $0 in investment returns everyone knows she embezzled. I never thought I'd be the guy writing about how I got completely by the woman I thought I knew. Honestly, I thought I had my life figured out with Lisa. We'd been married for 7 years, and yeah, there were the usual ups and downs, but I always believed we had a solid foundation. That was until I started noticing things that didn't add up, little signs that she was hiding something, and looking back, I should seen the warning signs earlier. It all started a few months ago when Lisa began acting weird. She'd be secretive about her phone, always keeping it close and texting late into the night. She'd suddenly become super interested in her appearance, spending hours at the gym, and occasionally I'd catch her lying about where she'd been. She'd say she was working late, but I'd find her car parked at some random coffee shop or her phone pinging with messages I couldn't see. She told me she was stressed at work, but I could tell there was more to it. Then one night I came home earlier than usual. I'd been out with some friends and I decided to swing by her office to surprise her. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car parked behind a car I didn't recognize. My stomach sank. I walked up to the door and I could hear muffled voices inside. I peeked through the window and saw Lisa, sitting close to a man I didn't know, laughing too loudly, touching his arm. My heart stopped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't storm in right away. Instead, I backed off, trying to process what I'd just seen. But I couldn't shake that feeling, the gut-wrenching certainty that she was cheating on me. I started digging around her stuff, reading her texts, checking her social media, trying to find some explanation. That's when I found the first real clue, a series of messages between Lisa and her boss, Mark, that were way more intimate than they should be. Flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up outside work. I saw her mention feeling so alive when she was with him and how she loved the secret they shared. That was the moment I realized I'd been played. She'd been lying to my face for months, pretending to be this devoted wife, all the while sneaking around with her boss. It hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I couldn't believe I missed all the signs, that I'd trusted her so blindly. It was like the ground had shifted beneath my feet and I was left standing there trying to hold myself together. The worst part, I had no idea how deep her deception went. I found out she'd been planning this for a while. She'd secretly sold our house to Mark for $350, $0, pretending she was pregnant to get the paperwork signed, forging my signature, and then disappearing with the money. She then claimed I owed her $200, $0 in investment returns, which everyone knew she'd embezzled from some shady side deals she'd been hiding. The extent of her lies was staggering. It was like I had married someone completely different than who I thought she was. After discovering all this, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. I confronted her the next day, demanding answers. She everything at first threw out a bunch of lies about how I was just jealous, how she was under so much stress, and that I was imagining things, but I wasn't buying it. I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, forged documents. She couldn't deny it anymore. The look in her eyes was cold, calculating, like she'd already made her peace with her betrayal. That's when I realized my life was crumbling around me. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, had been cheating, lying, stealing, and now she was trying to spin it all around on me. I was angry, yes, but mostly I was devastated. How did I miss all of this? How did I not see the signs? My mind kept racing, trying to piece together how she'd managed to pull this off for so long without me catching on. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this, her lies, her theft, her betrayal. I was determined to find out the truth, no matter how ugly it was. That's when I started planning my next move. I knew I had to be smart, because Lisa was a manipulative bitch who'd do anything to save herself. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd find out exactly how deep her deception went, and I'd make sure she paid for what she'd done to me and to our life together. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept circling back to her lies, her betrayal, and the fact that she'd been sneaking around with her boss, Mark. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was sitting on a powder keg. I needed to get to the bottom of this and fast. I started digging into her financials, her emails, everything I could find. That's when I uncovered the full extent of her schemes. Lisa had been playing me from the start. The fake pregnancy was her way to manipulate me into handing over the house, and she'd pretended to be pregnant for months. She'd even gone as far as faking doctor visits, buying maternity clothes, and lying about her doctor appointments. It was sick. Meanwhile, she secretly sold our family home to Mark for $350, $0. She forged my signature on the transfer documents. How she managed that, I still don't know. And then she disappeared with the money. She told everyone she was investing in a new business, but I found out the truth. She embezzled that money, invested in shady deals, and then used it to fund her affair. Then, to cover her tracks, she claimed I owed her $200, $0 in investment returns, which was just her way of trying to justify her theft and make me look like the villain. Everyone around us believed her, too. She's good at lying, that woman. But I wasn't just going to sit back and let her get away with it. I started to formulate a plan. I needed evidence to expose her, and I needed to do it carefully. I decided to set up a kind of sting, something to catch her in the act if she slipped up. I got a hidden camera, and I started monitoring her movements. I also hired a private investigator to dig into her dealings and her relationship with Mark. I needed to see if I could find anything more concrete, proof that would finally blow her cover. One night, I followed her to a hotel downtown. She was meeting Mark again, and this time I had the camera rolling. I watched her walk into the hotel, her heels clicking on the pavement, her face lit with excitement. When she came out a few hours later, she looked flushed, and I could see the glow of her lipstick on her lips. I was furious. I knew I had to confront her with what I'd seen, but I also knew I had to be careful. Lisa was manipulative and dangerous when cornered. While I was gathering evidence, I also started talking to some of her friends, and turns out, everyone knew she'd been acting strange. She'd been pulling away from her friends, lying about her whereabouts, and even telling people she was working late so she could meet Mark. I learned she'd been telling her boss she was pregnant to get special treatment, and she'd used that as leverage to sell the house. She lied about her health, her pregnancy, her intentions, all of it. She was spinning a web so intricate that I didn't even recognize her anymore. The worst part was feeling helpless. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, but now I saw her for what she really was: a liar, a thief, a cheat. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach every time I uncovered a new lie, and I kept asking myself, how did I miss all this? How did I not see the signs? I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty, in the vows we took. But she'd shattered all that, and I was left with nothing but a trail of lies and betrayal. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I had to make a move. I decided I'd gather enough evidence to confront her publicly, to show everyone what she'd done. I couldn't let her keep manipulating people or get away with the theft. At the same time, I was starting to think about divorce, about how to protect what was left of my life, my sanity, and my future. I'd been betrayed on every level, and I knew I had to take control of the situation before she tore everything apart completely. The plan was starting to take shape, but I knew Lisa was dangerous. She was clever, and she'd do anything to protect herself. Still, I was determined. I'd expose her lies, her theft, her cheating, every dirty secret she'd been hiding, and I'd make sure she paid for it. Because no one, not even the woman I'd loved, was going to get away with destroying what I'd built. By the time I had enough evidence to make my move, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. Every step I took was calculated, every phone call, every message carefully monitored. I knew Lisa was suspicious. I could see it in her eyes. She started acting even more bitchy, snapping at me over small things, trying to dismiss my questions about her whereabouts. It was clear she sensed I was onto her, but she didn't know how much I knew. One evening, I decided it was time for the confrontation. I wanted to catch her in the act, so I arranged for her to come home while I was secretly recording. I told her I had something important to discuss, something about our future, about the house, about everything she'd been hiding. She played her part well, acting like she was innocent and hurt, but I saw right through her. She was nervous, fidgeting, trying to hide her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. When she finally sat down, I laid out all the evidence I'd collected. I told her I knew about the sale of the house, about the forged signature, her affair with Mark, and the embezzlement. Her face twisted in a mixture of anger, defiance, and panic. She tried to deny everything, but I had the receipts, the bank statements, the emails. I even had the private investigators' reports confirming her meetings with Mark. Her reaction was classic. She started screaming, calling me crazy, accusing me of spying on her, trying to ruin her reputation. She said I was just jealous, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. She looked me dead in the eyes and lied outright, claiming she never cheated, never stole, and that I was just paranoid. But I knew better. I had seen her true face, greedy, manipulative, and utterly untrustworthy. That night I felt a mix of relief and rage. Relief because I finally had proof, and rage because I'd been so blind for so long. I wanted to shake her, tell her how much she'd hurt me, but I held back. I knew I had to be strategic. I was going to let her gaslight me into doubting myself. I needed to think about my next steps carefully. The next day, I started documenting everything, saving all the evidence, recording her reactions, and getting ready to make a formal move. I contacted a lawyer, prepared the paperwork for divorce, and started planning how to protect what little was left of my sanity and finances. I also decided I'd confront her family and friends, let them see who she really was. I wanted them to understand that her charming facade was just that, a facade. Underneath, she was a manipulative, lying bitch who'd done some serious damage. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act. She tried to play the victim, crying and whining about how I was ruining her life, how I was crazy and possessive. She claimed I was inventing these stories, that Mark was just a friend, that I was just jealous because she was so much better than me. That made me even angrier. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she pretend to be innocent after everything she'd done? I also found out she'd been telling her friends that I was abusive, trying to turn everyone against me. She painted herself as the victim, the innocent wife who was forced to do these things because I was so controlling. It made me realize how deep her lies went, how much she was willing to manipulate everyone around her to save herself. I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't let her spin her web any. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and now I just needed to execute it. I was determined to expose her for who she really was, someone who'd betrayed her vows, stolen from her own family, and lied her way through life. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not anymore. It was time to take control of my life, even if it meant tearing everything apart to do it. The day I finally decided to confront her in front of everyone was the day I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I knew I had enough proof now, enough to blow her entire house of lies sky high. I scheduled a meeting with her at a neutral place, a we used to go to before everything fell apart. I told her I had something important to discuss, but I wasn't going to tell her what it was beforehand. I wanted her to think I was still clueless, still naive, so I could catch her off guard. When she arrived, she was her usual bitchy self, smirking, trying to act confident like she had everything under control. She was dressed to impress, probably thinking she could manipulate her way out of this again. I sat across from her, and I could see her eyes darting around, trying to gauge my mood. I took a deep breath, pulled out a folder I'd prepared, and slid it across the table. I watched her eyes widen as she saw the evidence inside: bank statements showing her transfer of the house, forged signatures, emails with Mark, the private investigator's report. I laid out everything piece by piece in a calm but firm voice. I told her I knew about her affair, her secret sale of our home, her theft, and her lies. I told her I had recordings of her meeting Mark, photos of her with him, and proof she'd been lying about her pregnancy. I wanted her to see that I wasn't bluffing. Her face went pale for a moment, then she quickly regained her composure. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and started with her usual bullshit, denying everything, claiming I was just jealous, that Mark was just a business acquaintance, that I was paranoid and insecure. She threw in some tears, trying to make me feel guilty, claiming I was ruining her reputation and that I was crazy for suspecting her. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her tricks, and I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. I pushed the evidence closer to her, watching her squirm. I told her I was done playing her game, that I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this anymore. I told her I was going to divorce her, take her to court, and make sure she paid for everything she'd done, her theft, her lies, her betrayal. I wanted her to understand that her manipulations wouldn't work anymore. I also made it clear that I'd be exposing her to everyone, her family, her friends, her colleagues, so they could see her for what she truly was, a dishonest, selfish woman who'd betrayed her vows, her family, and her own morals. Her reaction was predictable. She started crying, screaming, accusing me of ruining her life. She called me crazy, possessive, and abusive, trying to turn the tables. She said I was just jealous because she'd moved on with Mark and that I was trying to destroy her reputation out of spite. I let her have her moment, but I knew I had to stay focused. This wasn't about her tears or her lies anymore. It was about exposing her for what she'd done. That confrontation was the turning point. I realized I'd crossed a line. No more hiding, no more pretending I didn't see the truth. I was finally taking control of my life. I told her she had a choice: come clean and face the consequences, or keep lying and watch everything fall apart. She looked at me with that bitchy sneer, trying to compose herself, but I saw the fear lurking behind her eyes. She knew I had her cornered. After I left I immediately contacted my lawyer. I wanted to file for divorce, get a restraining order, and start the process of reclaiming what was mine, my house, my money, my life. I also reached out to the bank and the authorities about her forged signatures and embezzlement. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was done playing her game. I was done being the victim of her lies. In the days that followed, I felt lighter, like a huge weight had been lifted. But at the same time, I was angry at her, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to understand how I'd been so blind. I also felt a strange sense of relief, finally knowing the truth, finally exposing her. I realized that I'd been holding on to a fantasy of the life I thought we had, but now I was facing reality. A reality where I had been betrayed in the worst way. Now, I'm just trying to pick up the pieces. I know there's a long road ahead, but I also know I'll be okay. I've learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes the people you love the most can turn out to be the biggest liars. I want to warn anyone reading this: pay attention to the small signs. Don't ignore your gut, because if you do, you might end up discovering the worst. Betrayal of all, someone you thought was yours was just playing you all along. And that's a lesson I won't forget anytime soon. After the confrontation, everything moved so quickly I barely had time to breathe. The legal process kicked in almost immediately. My lawyer got the ball rolling on the divorce, and I was determined to get everything I could out of her: our house, the money she stole, and any other assets she'd hidden. I also made sure to file reports about her forged signatures and embezzlement. She'd crossed a line I wasn't going to let her get away with. The hardest part was dealing with her constant manipulations. Even after I laid everything out, she kept trying to twist the story, to make herself look like the victim. She'd call me names, accuse me of being controlling or abusive, and try to turn our friends and family against me. She played the victim so well it almost worked. I had to stay strong, keep my proof ready, and not let her gaslight me into second-guessing what I knew was true. I remember one night, she showed up at my house unannounced, crying and begging me to give her another chance. She told me she loved me, that she'd been under so much stress, that all her lies and cheating were just a mistake, that she never meant to hurt me. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I knew everything about her affair, the house sale, the forged signatures, the embezzlement. I told her I was done, that I was done being her fool, her pawn, her victim. I told her she had to face the consequences of her actions, that I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done. She snapped then, calling me a monster, saying I was ruining her life because I'd caught her. She said I was just jealous of Mark, jealous of her success, jealous of her freedom. She claimed I was controlling her, that I'd driven her to cheat. Honestly, I just stood there, feeling numb. I'd lost so much trust, so much faith in her. All the love I'd once had was dying fast, replaced by anger and disappointment. Meanwhile, I was also dealing with the fallout from her lies to everyone else. Her family was furious when they found out what she'd done. Her friends looked at me with pity, but I knew most of them already suspected she was a manipulative bitch. I even reached out to some of her former colleagues, people she'd lied to about her pregnancy, her business investments, and gave them the real story. I wanted everyone to see her for who she really was, a liar, a thief, a manipulator. The emotional toll was crushing. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and exhausted. I'd loved this woman, trusted her with everything, and she'd thrown it all away for some affair and a quick scheme to steal from us. I kept asking myself how I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. But I also knew I couldn't dwell on it. I had to move forward, rebuild my life, and protect what was left of my sanity. So I threw myself into the legal process, making sure I secured the house, the money, and any assets I could prove she'd stolen. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to pull another stunt. I also started seeing a therapist, partly to help me process everything, partly to keep myself grounded. Honestly, I was a mess. But I knew I had to be strong for myself. The worst part was the sense of loss. Not just losing my marriage, but losing the woman I thought I knew. The woman I loved turned out to be someone I didn't recognize anymore. I kept thinking about the moments I'd missed, the signs I'd ignored, and how I'd trusted her blindly. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living in that shadow of betrayal. I had to face the facts, accept what happened, and move on. Looking back, I realize this whole ordeal has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the things I once took for granted. I've learned that people can hide their true selves very well, and that sometimes the person you love most can turn out to be the biggest liar. I want to warn anyone who might be going through something similar. Trust your instincts, pay attention to the small signs, and never ignore that voice in your head telling you something's wrong. Because if you do, you risk losing everything, your happiness, your trust, and maybe even your life as you knew it. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this ordeal has changed me. I used to believe in the idea of forever, in the sanctity of marriage, in honesty as the foundation of a relationship. But Lisa shattered all that. She proved that behind a pretty face and a charming smile, some people are just manipulative, greedy, and willing to lie and cheat to get what they want. I've learned that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something you earn, and if it's broken, it's almost impossible to fully restore. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever gone through, but I also see it as a kind of liberation. I'm no longer living under her shadow or her lies. I've taken back control of my life, my money, and my sanity. I won't let her steal any more of my peace or my future. The house is gone, yes, but I've started over. I've learned to value myself and my boundaries. I've realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and rebuilding, stronger than ever. I want anyone reading this to know that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches us resilience. Don't ignore the red flags, don't dismiss your feelings, and don't stay in a situation where you're constantly doubting yourself. Trust your instincts, even if it hurts, because in the end, the truth will come out, and you're better off facing it head-on than living in denial. Most importantly, I've learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the bitterness and anger that threaten to consume you. I won't forget what Lisa did, but I refuse to let her define my happiness anymore. I'm moving forward, one step at a time, with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. This whole experience has been a brutal lesson in trust, deception, and survival. And while I wouldn't wish this pain on anyone, I can say with certainty that I'm stronger now because of it. I've faced my worst fears, uncovered the truth, and come out the other side. And for anyone else out there feeling betrayed, lost, or broken, know that you're not alone. There is life after betrayal, and it can be better than you ever imagined. You just have to be brave enough to take that first step toward healing.